Have you ever imagined eating a piece of bread and discovering that it had ashes on it? It sounds like something out of a horror movie, right? But believe me, it really happened, and it wasn't an accident. The Romans, who were masters at many things, had a very strange custom. They mixed ashes with their bread. And the craziest thing is that this wasn't a kitchen mistake. Now think about it. Why did they do this? What was the reason behind this strange gesture? Could there be a secret so powerful and frightening that no one wanted to discover it? This mystery has intrigued historians for centuries, and believe me, there's something much bigger behind it than you can imagine. Stay with me until the end of the video, because I'm going to reveal the solution to this ancient enigma and show you a side of Roman history that you've never heard of before. It's going to be a discovery that will pique your curiosity and make you see ancient Rome in a whole new way. Don't miss it. Check it out now if you're already subscribed so you don't miss these incredible revelations. Bread in Roman life, the basis of ancient food. Imagine living in ancient Rome, where the streets were bustling, the markets full of voices and aromas, and every household table had one thing in common: bread. Yes, bread was not just a food, it was the basis of survival and, in a way, a reflection of society. In ancient Rome, this humble staple united patricians and plebeians, rich and poor, albeit in very different ways. In the homes of plebeians, bread was often dark and heavy, made with mixed grains such as barley, oats, and, in some cases, inferior wheat. These ingredients were the cheapest, accessible to families who needed to feed large groups with scarce resources. Called panis plebeius, this bread had a rustic appearance and, at times, a slightly bitter taste, the result of impurities and the simple production process. The flour, since it was not sifted, brought with it pieces of husk and even small traces of dust and ash from the wood-fired ovens where it was baked. Interestingly, these elements were not seen as defects, but as part of the experience and sustenance that this food provided. For the working masses of Rome, panis plebeius was more than a meal. It symbolized endurance. It was robust, nutritious, and capable of sustaining workers during long days in the fields, construction sites, or even in the Roman galleys. This bread was also often eaten with simple accompaniments, such as olive oil, salt, or dried herbs, becoming an example of culinary inventiveness in times of scarcity. Now, in the homes of the patricians, the story was quite different. The wealthiest ate panis candidus, a refined white bread made with the purest wheat, carefully sifted to remove all impurities. This bread symbolized status and sophistication. Its light texture and mild flavor made it the preferred choice at banquets and parties of the Roman elite. To give you an idea, white bread was so highly valued that in some cases it was served as an offering to the gods or as a gift on special occasions. The difference between these types of bread was not only in the quality of the ingredients, but also in the experience they provided. While panis plebeius was functional and essential, panis candidus represented luxury and refined pleasures. This distinction reinforced the social inequalities of the time, with bread acting as a clear marker of status. But bread was not just an element of the diet, it also played a fundamental role in Roman politics. Have you ever heard of the expression bread and circuses? It reflects a policy adopted by many emperors to control the masses and ensure stability. The free distribution of bread, known as annona, was one of the pillars of this strategy. Through it, the government ensured that the poor population had access to basic food, reducing the risk of revolts. The lines to receive the free bread were long, and the product distributed was not always of the best quality, but it fulfilled its function, keeping the people fed and satisfied. Another fascinating aspect is the economic and social impact of bread in ancient Rome. Urban bakeries, called pistrina, were centers of large-scale production. These bakeries employed many slaves who worked in grueling conditions to meet the high demand of the cities. The wood-fired ovens operated day and night, filling the streets with an unmistakable aroma that mixed with the noise of the crowds. These establishments were not only places of production, they also functioned as meeting points. People from different social classes frequented the pistrina, creating an environment where information, rumors, and opinions circulated freely. In many cases, these gatherings in the ovens became the stage for discussions about politics, business negotiations, and even personal intrigues. Now, what makes all this even more fascinating is a detail that few know. Some bread recipes included an unexpected ingredient that was absorbed directly from the environment. This element, although seemingly insignificant, carried profound cultural and practical meanings. Do you want to know how it became an integral part of Roman cuisine and what it says about the way of life at that time? Don't miss the next topic, where we'll unravel the mysteries behind this peculiar Roman custom. And before we go any further, think about this. If you lived in ancient Rome, what kind of bread would you eat? The robust panis plebeius, full of tradition and substance, or the sophisticated panis candidus, a symbol of luxury and refinement? Share your opinion in the comments. Your insight can help us bring you even more stories from this incredible time. Ash in Roman ovens, an unexpected ingredient. While bread sustained daily life in ancient Rome, there was a curious detail about its production that intrigues historians to this day. Ash. This seemingly simple element played a surprising and multifaceted role in the making of that civilization's most essential food. To understand the presence of this ingredient, we need to go back to the methods and practices of Roman bakeries, where tradition, functionality, and chance combined to create something unique. The pistrina environment, where it all began. Roman bakeries, known as pistrina, were bustling places of activity. Imagine the heat of the ovens, the sound of grain being ground in huge stone millstones, and the constant movement of slaves and free laborers. These bakeries were responsible for supplying entire neighborhoods with the bread that sustained the population. The ovens used in these bakeries were heated by wood, a practical and abundant choice in the Mediterranean region. Over the course of the day, ash would accumulate on the interior surfaces of the ovens and would often mix with the ingredients during the bread-making process. While today, this might seem like an oversight or even contamination, to the Romans, it was a natural occurrence, part of what made bread authentic and, in some cases, desirable. Ash was not seen as dirt, but rather as a functional element that enriched the final product in unexpected ways. The role of ash in Roman baking. The presence of ash in Roman bread had several implications, many of them quite practical. First, the ash contributes to the alkalinity of the dough, which helps create a more balanced pH during the fermentation process. This condition favored the growth of natural yeasts, improving the texture and flavor of the bread. In a time when industrialized yeasts did not exist, these natural solutions were essential to guarantee a quality final product. In addition, the ash contains traces of minerals such as calcium, potassium, and magnesium, which inadvertently enriched the nutritional value of the bread. For a population that often suffered from poorly balanced diets, this accidental addition could make a significant difference. It is no wonder that many believed that the bread made in these ovens had an earthy taste, something that connected them to nature and their roots, a custom that reflects culture and necessity. We cannot ignore the fact that mixing ashes into bread also reflected the reality of everyday life in Rome. For the plebeians, whose priority was simply to have something to eat, ashes were part of the rusticity of their food. Among the patricians, the inclusion of ashes could be reinterpreted as a touch of authenticity or even an aspect linked to tradition. After all, many customs that arose out of necessity ended up being valued over time as cultural characteristics. There was also a practical issue. Thoroughly cleaning the ovens was not a priority. The Romans were more concerned with mass production to meet the growing demand of the population. In large cities like Rome, where thousands of loaves of bread were made daily, efficiency trumped the search for perfection. Traditions that echo through time. Interestingly, some aspects of this practice survived indirectly in regions where artisanal baking is still valued. The use of wood-fired ovens and the slightly smoky flavor they impart to bread continue to be enjoyed by many cultures around the world. While the inclusion of ash is not intentional today, the concept of harnessing the natural characteristics of the oven is a direct legacy of the Romans. The element of surprise, more than just ash. What is truly fascinating is that, for the Romans, ash was not the only surprise ingredient in their cuisine. Other substances such as garum, a fermented fish sauce, were also widely used, showing a willingness to experiment and make the most of whatever resources were available. This begs the question, was the ash in bread just a coincidence, or did the Romans fully understand the benefits it brought? And speaking of benefits and peculiarities, what else can be revealed about Roman eating habits? In the next section, we will unravel how bread, simple in its essence, became a powerful political tool in a society that lived in the shadow of emperors and social turmoil. But first, tell us, do you think the use of ashes in Roman bread was pure coincidence or a clever tactic by the bakers of the time? Leave your thoughts in the comments and share your opinion with other history enthusiasts. The use of ashes in Roman bread. A peculiar custom. Now that we understand the relevance of bread in Roman life, it is time to unveil one of the most intriguing aspects of its production: the use of ashes as an ingredient. This practice, at first glance, may seem unusual or even strange by modern standards, but in ancient Rome, it had cultural, practical, and symbolic motivations that deserve to be understood in detail. After all, why did the Romans add ashes to bread? And what does this tell us about their society and their relationship with food? The cultural and practical context of the use of ashes. In ancient Rome, food was deeply influenced by material conditions and the empirical wisdom accumulated over the centuries. Ash, for example, was not seen as a waste product without value, but rather as a multifaceted resource, widely used in a variety of everyday activities, from hygiene to agriculture. In the case of bread production, its presence was associated with both the baking process and issues of flavor, preservation, and symbolism. The primary reason for using ash in bread was practical. Roman ovens were wood-fired, which inevitably generated a significant amount of ash in the environment. This ash was often mixed with flour during dough preparation, creating a bread with a darker color and a slightly smoky flavor. For the plebeians, this was not just a matter of chance, but an accepted and even valued characteristic of panis plebeius. In contrast, the patricians, with greater access to resources, invested in techniques that minimized ash contamination, resulting in panis candidus. But it was not just a practical issue. Ash also had nutritional and functional value. They contain minerals such as calcium, potassium, and magnesium, which could enrich the diet, especially among the less privileged classes, whose diet was often deficient in these nutrients. Although there was no scientific understanding of this at the time, the Romans had an empirical wisdom that led them to recognize the benefits of certain dietary practices, even without understanding the underlying mechanisms. The symbolism of ashes in Roman culture. Ashes also carried a symbolic meaning that transcended their practical function. In Roman culture, they were associated with purification and the transience of life. In religious rituals, ashes were used as an element of cleansing and renewal, symbolizing both destruction and creation. This symbolism may have influenced their inclusion in bread, transforming an everyday food into something charged with spiritual meaning. Another interesting point is that the use of ashes may have had a ritualistic function on certain occasions. For example, during religious festivals and celebrations, it was common for food to be prepared in special ways to honor the gods or to symbolize the relationship between man and the divine. It would not be surprising to discover that bread with ashes played a role in these contexts, reinforcing its importance in both the material and spiritual spheres. Fun facts about bread with ashes. Did you know that to this day, some cultures maintain similar practices? In certain places, the use of ashes in cooking is seen as a traditional technique, capable of giving unique flavors and beneficial properties to food. In ancient Rome, this tradition may have originated as a pragmatic solution, but it has evolved into a practice that has spanned generations. Another interesting fact is that while the white bread of the patricians was considered more noble, bread with ashes is now prized by chefs and food enthusiasts for its unique flavor and texture profile. This reversal of values reflects how our perceptions of food evolve over time, influenced by cultural, social, and economic factors. A bridge to the next chapter. Now that we understand how and why ashes were incorporated into Roman bread, an intriguing question arises. How did this practice connect to the urban bakeries and the large-scale production system of ancient Rome? These establishments were not just places of work, but veritable hubs of innovation and social interaction, where tradition met the need to feed a growing population. We will learn more about these fascinating spaces in the next section. Before we continue, think about this. Could you imagine enjoying bread with ashes, knowing what this represented to the Romans? Share your thoughts, because your opinion is what makes this journey even more interesting. Let's uncover the secrets of ancient Rome together. The legacy of ashes in Roman bread and its lasting impact. The ashes used in bread production in ancient Rome were not just a remnant of the environment in which the ovens operated. They also represented a practice that continued well beyond Roman times, leaving significant marks on culture, gastronomy, and even food science. To understand how this seemingly simple custom transcended the centuries, we need to look at the social, political, and cultural contexts that shaped the meaning of bread and its ingredients. Get ready to discover how something as common as ashes gained a special role in history and in the collective imagination. A custom that crossed generations. The practice of adding ashes to bread did not disappear with the end of the Roman Empire. In fact, this technique continued to be used in some regions of Europe during the Middle Ages and even in the early modern period. This was partly due to the alkaline qualities of ash, which helped improve the texture of the bread, but there was also a cultural element at play. Ash came to be seen as an ingredient that connected people to their traditions, keeping alive a practice inherited from their Roman ancestors. In medieval cooking, for example, ash was used in recipes for festive or ceremonial breads. In some rural communities, especially in Italy and France, the use of ash is believed to have symbolic meaning, representing purification or transition. This shows how an originally utilitarian technique became a deeper cultural element associated with collective identity. Ashes in alchemy and medicine. Another fascinating aspect is how the use of ash in bread has been linked to other areas of knowledge. During the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, alchemy and folk medicine explored the properties of wood ash. It was considered a component with healing potential and was used in potions, creams, and even as a dietary supplement to treat health problems. This belief was fueled by the idea that ash contained essential minerals such as calcium, potassium, and magnesium, which could strengthen the body. In many regions, especially in agrarian communities, the use of ash was widely accepted as a means of supplementing a diet poor in nutrients. Although there was no deep scientific understanding at the time, folk wisdom often correctly identified real benefits that would later be confirmed by modern science. The influence on modern gastronomy. Interestingly, the legacy of ash in bread is not confined to the past. In recent years, renowned chefs and food enthusiasts have begun to revive ancient practices, including the use of ash in food preparation. In fine dining restaurants, breads and other dishes incorporate ash from herbs or wood to add layers of flavor and complexity. This return to roots also reflects a growing interest in traditional techniques and natural ingredients. For example, ash bread is offered on high-end menus as a way to pay homage to past practices while offering a unique tasting experience. What was once seen as a simple byproduct of the baking process is now celebrated as an element that brings history and authenticity to the table. Connection to sustainability. Another relevant point is how the practice of using ash can be viewed through the lens of sustainability. At a time when food waste and environmental impacts are in the spotlight, reviving techniques like this is a way to use resources more efficiently. Ashes, which are often discarded as waste, can be used creatively, showing that the ancient Romans were ahead of their time in terms of pragmatism. The cultural legacy. Finally, the use of ash in Roman bread is a powerful reminder of how food culture is intrinsically linked to the history and identity of a people. This custom has spanned the centuries, leaving a lasting impact that can still be felt today. More than just an ingredient, ash represents a connection between the past and the present, uniting generations through an element as fundamental as bread. Now that we understand how ash shaped not only bread, but also culture, gastronomy, and science, let's move on. After all, what else can the history of Roman food teach us about creativity, survival, and adaptation? Are you ready to find out? Before we continue, let us know what you think. Have you ever tried something that so directly connects the past to the present? How about sharing your thoughts on these ancient techniques that still inspire our modern cuisine? Let's take a journey through time together. And there you have it, folks. We've reached the end of this mystery revealed. Now you know everything about how the Romans put ashes on their bread, a detail so curious that it still intrigues historians today. But hey, stay tuned. This is just the beginning, because there are many other secrets of ancient Rome that will surprise you. Who knows what else these ancient masters of history have in store for us? So don't miss the next video. Stay tuned, because the history of Rome still has many hidden mysteries waiting for you. Until next time.